I guess this only came up because I really wasn't getting sleep. I'm a chronic insomniac, but I guess we all are nowadays. When I was about 13 years old, I had a friend over to my family's new house for Halloween. It was our first time trick-or-treating in that neighborhood, and we were excited to test the waters because it was a nicer area and we figured that meant bigger candy. We were right. My new neighbors were, for the most part, all incredibly kind, and because they were all a bit better off than we'd been used to, there was definitely an upward flux in candy amount and quality. My parents, in attempting to celebrate their new house, threw a party and started drinking early in the evening, which left them out of reach for the most part. We were having a blast until we found ourselves about 6 blocks out, towards the end of the community. Every house was lit up, decorated and eager to have us, except one. In the middle of the street, there was a house with every light off. We figured, as we were sure anyone would, that it meant that whoever lived there wasn't handing out candy. We didn't think much of it and continued walking by. As we neared the path that led to the front door of the house, we heard a loud abrupt "Psst" from the shadowy front door. Scared but excited by the surrounding festivities, we stared into the darkness and made out a figure sitting on a bench that sat next to the front door.
Psst.
We heard once more.
Sorry the lights are out. My electricity is busted. But don't worry, I have candy,
said the voice that seemed to be of a man's. My friend and I weren't stupid, most of the time. But in that instance, we were driven by a need for candy and a sense of adventure. We walked up to the front door and saw an old man sitting next to a bowl of candy, as promised. We stared at him until I mustered up the courage to reach out my bag and say trick or treat.
Not so fast,
said the old man.
Let me look at those costumes.
We stood there, awkwardly watching him sit back and stare, admiring the simple and unimpressive details of our costumes.
Wow, Zorro and a pirate. You guys are definitely some of the best I've seen tonight. Say, you wouldn't mind if I snapped a picture, would you?
He said as he pulled for a Polaroid camera he had tucked in behind him. We nodded in fear as he reached the camera to his face and snapped the picture. At this point, we knew something wasn't right. He asked my friend if he could take a better look at his costume. He could tell it was handmade and wanted to admire it closer. He held my friend by the shoulders and stared at his costume for what felt like a lifetime. We walked away, confused but mostly relieved that nothing happened. When we got home, we told my parents about our experience with the man. They quickly sobered up and started dialing the police, as the mood of their party began to shift to concern and worry. The police went to investigate within the hour. The house didn't have electricity, only the man wasn't there. The house had been vacant for a very long time. I'm a 5'6" underage girl. Let's keep it at that. I live in a rather small town with about 20,000 people, and really nothing happens here. It's very uneventful. I'm a very paranoid person that's always anxious and scared of everything, but I think this time, I really believe my paranoia did me good. This past Halloween, I really wanted to walk around at night when people are trick-or-treating and be alone on my own for once. I grew up in a city with a high crime rate most of my life and just moved to a small city, and I thought I could have some free will to walk around the streets, not too far from my home, and soak in the atmosphere since I'm too old to trick-or-treat now. I found the perfect opportunity to do that when my mom and brother planned on running a few errands on Halloween night, and I could be dropped off to walk around until they finished. I was so happy and excited to do this since I'm a very cheesy person and I cherish the small things, like being alone. So I was dropped off around 8 p.m. with a coffee and my Beats to listen to music. It was so comforting to have that time, and I was just watching people get candy and having fun and sipping coffee while also being very paranoid. Growing up in a highly dangerous city with a paranoid mother did me good and gave me a lot of anxiety. Okay, so that's not all that great, but it helped me be aware of my surroundings at all times. So I'm walking around, listening to music, sipping coffee, and looking over my shoulder every 10 seconds. A lot of kids and cars are out, so I'm not all that scared, but I'm consistently looking around. So I make it off the street that has the most people, turn the corner, and I see this street that is just dead. And by dead, I mean dead. No decorations out front on any of the houses. Everybody's lights are off, even though it's not very late, and there are hardly any cars. Now, I think this is probably nothing, and these people just don't celebrate Halloween, since it's not everybody's favorite holiday. But my paranoia still set in, and I'm kind of freaked out. But I continue walking down the street at a casual pace. As I'm making my way towards the end of the street, consistently looking behind me just for precautions, the song I was playing on my phone ends, and another comes on that I didn't want to hear. So I take my phone out, pause the song, and change it. As soon as I paused my music, I heard this rhythmic pat, pat, pat. Now, my headphones are very good at blocking out outside noises, so whatever this was, it was either something really loud or something very close. I immediately look behind me to see a dark silhouette of a man sprinting towards me. I am petrified, and I honestly cannot run. I was honestly so stupid and thought that maybe they weren't running after me. I speed walk, and this guy is getting closer. I come to the end of the street and see that a mother is pushing her kid in a stroller and talking to a friend, so I turn their way and walk close to them. I have taken off my headphones and hear this person's footsteps slow as he comes up alongside me and walks past me down the street and turns left. To this day, I don't know if I avoided an incident of something very, very bad, or the man wasn't running after me and had intentions of going elsewhere and I just thought the worst. I don't know what could have happened, and I'm terrified to think about it. Once a year, Halloween rolls around. I just joined a new rugby club back in August, but hadn't gotten too involved in the social side of things just yet. That all changed around Halloween. The club had a party at the clubhouse, which apparently anyone who was anyone would be attending. My friends didn't have too much going on that night, so I figured this would be a good night to see these guys out of a rugby capacity. I made up a costume, went to the clubhouse, and was surprised to see that I was quite early. In fact, I was the first guy to show up, and 5 of the girls were already present. Almost immediately, one of the girls seemed to take a shine to me, and I locked into her for the balance of the night. We chatted, we drank together, we danced, and of course we wound up on the balcony together. Use your imagination for what happened. So it's getting around midnight, and I'm on the balcony with the girl, wondering if I'm going to be able to close the deal. No sale, she says. Friends of hers are planning on crashing at her place afterwards, which means there's no chance of me getting in a cab with her. We make out some more, and it's becoming evident that nothing further is happening for me with this girl. I'm drunk and pleased with the makeout. I figure now is a good time to get running. We kiss goodnight, and I leave the club around 1 a.m. It's a cold and crisp night as I walk to the first major intersection to hail a cab. Very few cars are on the road, so I pull up my phone and look up a number. Busy signal. I try again. Voicemail. Try once more. Still voicemail. At this point I think, well, I'm 5 kilometers from home. I might as well get walking. I'm still pleasantly drunk, still smiling after the events with the girl. I'm in a good mood, and I'm thinking I'll be positive, walk home, and be in bed in an hour. The path I take, which is the most direct route home from my club, happens to go past one of the largest cemeteries in my city. I don't think too much of it. It's just a cemetery, and I am far from superstitious. However, tonight I swear I can hear rustling and human voices. I noticed a few silhouettes among the headstones and deem this to be the source of the noises. Just teenagers, I muttered to myself. Fireworks are legal in my province around Halloween, and when I was a teenager I was all too happy to find somewhere spooky and secluded to set off my fireworks stash. I quicken my step, and sure enough I hear all the telltale popping sounds of fireworks going off. After passing the graveyard, I get to the hill that forms the border of my subdivision. There's a major road that runs up the hill, but it has a walking path that you can elect to take, which shaves easily 10 minutes off the walk. At this point, I've been hiking for some 45 minutes. It's cold, my buzz is wearing off, and I'm just cranky. The shortcut may be dark, but damn it, it's a shortcut. I reason with myself that I'm 6'6", 225 pounds, a rugby player, and I'm carrying a hard hat, part of my costume, that would help me defend myself in a pinch. So the shortcut it is. As soon as I get onto the walking path into the trees, I'm struck by how silent it is. The brief interruptions from the rare driver who is on the road at 1:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning are now non-existent. All I can hear are my footsteps and the rustle of leaves under my shoes. At least, I think that's all I can hear. I notice an echo, but it's a little out of phase, almost like it's not an echo, but that someone is following me. I stop walking, and a split second later, the echo stops. I'm now very nervous. It's too dark to look around, so instead I try to convince myself that I'm drunk and paranoid and my mind is playing tricks on me. Nonetheless, I speed up my pace and listen carefully for any foreign sounds. I make it up to the top of the path, to the streetlights, and spin around as soon as I am in the light. As much as I try to write it off as my own imagination, I am convinced that a small figure in a black hoodie has dived behind a bush the very second that I whirled around. Now that I've seen what I assume is someone following me, I start jogging. It's out of character for me to be this afraid of, well, nothing, but it's late and dark and cold and I've been drinking, so I am not taking any chances. I'm a good 10 minutes from my place, less if I run. So I run, but I swear that the hooded person is running with me. Finally, I make it to the crest of the hill where my building is. It's dead silent. I live on a very quiet street. My apartment has a big security door that only the tenants have keys for, so I know that if I can make it into the apartment, I'll be safe. I sprint up the walk and then stop, dead. Right in front of the security door, with its back turned to me, is the same figure in the hoodie that I'd seen at the end of the walking path. I can't see its face, but I'm positive. It's in my path and I know I need to bypass it to get into my building. I take a few steps towards the door and suddenly it turns to face me. The face on the figure cannot be described. It was just a mess of scar tissue. No eyes, no nose, barely even lips. Just a pile of scar tissue. I opened my mouth to scream, but the words wouldn't come. The figure put its hands on my shoulders, and that is all I remember. When I came to the next morning, the sunlight was streaming in my blinds, and I had a splitting headache. I assumed the episode with the burned boy had just been my imagination. I walked downstairs to grab a paper and saw the following headline: Burnaby boy killed in firework accident. There was a file photo. He was a slight kid in a black hoodie with a mischievous smile. I went on to read the article, and it talked about the boy and his friends meeting at the Forest Lawn Cemetery to tell scary stories and light fireworks. If you are a fan of Halloween and enjoy dressing up, then you are probably familiar with those pop-up Halloween stores that take over abandoned shopping malls or spots and strip malls for a few weeks each year, only to disappear again until next year. I live in a small town, and while I am sure we could have gone to the local Walmart, however, my two friends and I wanted to try the new pop-up Halloween store, Mr. Fun Time's Halloween Extravaganza. Everyone had been chatting about the new place in town, and there were signs hung up all over the place. Come one, come all to Mr. Funtime's Halloween Extravaganza. It was one of those places that took a spot at the end of town in the long-abandoned mall that closed the previous summer. Rumor was that the city was going to tear it down and build a new parking lot for nearby businesses. That hadn't happened yet, but what was temporarily in its place was the most amazing Halloween store I had ever seen. The place was huge and fit with a mini carnival outside with clowns with makeup done so well you could swear it was real. They smiled and waved as we walked in front of the store, and they were everywhere. They were made to look exactly like Mr. Funtime, the store's mascot, which was all green with black hair and fangs. When he grinned, he had little words written on his teeth that said, HALLOWEEN. Halloween. It was weird, but for whatever reason it seemed to work. People all over town flocked to the new store in droves. They sold food like hot dogs, nachos and cheese, and when you entered the store, it was dark, except for the black lights all over and more of those green clowns that offered their assistance to help you find just the right costume. I was looking around the store when my best friend, Joe, gravitated directly towards these weird masks that were painted all white. On his way over, he knocked over a stand with glass makeup paints, and they spilt all over. All the clowns in the store stopped what they were doing and looked at Joe. Joe smirked and rolled his eyes, not even attempting to pick it up. Dude, aren't you going to tell someone you did that? I bent down trying to pick up the broken glass, and finally a woman with pink hair and dead eyes came over with a mop. Oh, I'm really sorry. She said nothing to me and just began to clean up the mess as though she were a zombie. I looked around the store and all the green clowns were now trying to assist the many customers that lined the store. There was carnival music playing over the loudspeakers, and I tried to concentrate, but it seemed like it was getting louder by the second.
Wow, these are weird,
Joe said, picking up a white mask with no holes for breathing or eye holes cut out. It looked like one of those masks you would hang on a wall for decoration, but wouldn't wear. Those are boring. Don't tell me you're going to buy one of those, I said, wiping the white makeup onto my jeans that seemed to stick to my fingers like slime. What was this stuff made of?
I don't know, I just like the masks.
Joe looked at the mask with a look of a guy that was in love. I didn't understand it, but then my other friend Eric looked over towards these giant snakes and decided he just had to have one. I rolled my eyes and ignored them while I was walking around the store alone. I was eyeing a pair of giant glasses that I thought looked kind of funny when someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Break it, you pay for it," said the voice. I turned around and looked up at the face greeting me. It was one of those giant green painted clown guys. I'm just looking." "Well, is there something I can help you find?" He grinned wide, and I noticed there was something almost unnatural about his mouth, and I saw it had traces of blood dripping from it. I shrugged it off because it was Halloween after all, and I didn't want to seem scared. "I'm okay for now. I just thought these giant glasses looked kind of funny." The clown looked at me and stopped grinning. He stared at me for a long while as I watched the unblinking look in his big black eyes. Then he smiled wide again, those pointed fangs jetting out like razors, and walked away from me and went to speak to someone else. I watched him, unfazed, as he walked up to a woman that was standing with a small child, and I saw her look at him and act completely normal, as though he were just an average person in a costume. I couldn't shake the feeling that these actors were all really into their jobs, and I guess it made it okay since they were getting into the spirit of the whole season. I heard Joe then scream my name.
"Reggie, come here, quick!"
I walked over to where he was standing, and I looked at him. He was holding that damn stupid mask on his face. Dude, seriously, get something scary.
It won't come off.
I looked at him and smirked. What do you mean it won't come off? I looked over at Eric, who was now standing next to me with a package of fake mustaches. I looked down at the bag and rolled my eyes.
What is going on?
Eric asked, looking at us both.
It won't come off, guys.
This isn't funny, man. Come on, I'm ready to go. I looked at them both and began to walk away.
No, please, help!
Eric yelled, and he was now making a scene. Parents and other customers were looking at him like he was just some crazy teenager on drugs. "Can I be of some assistance?" said one of the green clowns that were now standing in front of me.
It won't come off!
Eric yelled again. This time I could hear the tears in his voice. I was suddenly very concerned, and the clown just looked down and grinned at Eric. "Come with me, I think I may be able to assist you." Joe was still freaking out.
I can't breathe!
His voice was now growing muffled, and the clown grabbed him by the arm and pulled him towards the back of the store. I followed, with Eric behind me. "Where do you think you're going?" "We were going with you to help our friend." "Oh, don't worry. We will take good care of him." He pointed to a sign that read, "All customers are important to us, here at Mr. Fun Times." He took Joe and shut the door behind him. I heard it lock. When I ran to open it, it wouldn't budge.
What the hell?
Eric asked. "I guess we just wait?" We waited for what seemed like hours, but only had been about 30 minutes. We stood there as we watched all customers in the store shopping and check out. The zombie girl with the dead eyes and pink hair was ringing stuff up, but she was doing it in such a cathartic state that it was apparent to me something was wrong. I looked around the entire store and I saw clowns walking people towards other doors like the one we were standing by currently. I looked around and finally the door opened and Joe came out looking as dead as the girl with pink hair. Eric and I were both relieved, but there was something wrong with his eyes. He looked like he was stoned or something.
Hey man, you okay?
Asked Eric.
Let's go,
he mumbled. Eric and I didn't waste any time getting out of that store because there was something off about the entire place. When I got home, I was in the mood to watch television and forget about the events of the afternoon. The next day, I was at school, sitting at the lunch table with Eric and Joe as Eric and I talked about sports, which was a usual thing for us. Joe stared blankly at the table. As soon as the bell rang for our 1 o'clock period, he stood up mechanically and walked out of the cafeteria. Eric and I looked at each other. What was wrong with him? He walked down the hallway and out of the front door of the school. Joe, where are you going? He didn't answer, he just kept walking. Eric tried to stop him, but he just ignored us and kept going. We followed him all the way back to Mr. Funtime's Halloween extravaganza. There was no way we were going back to this place. It creeped me out. Stop!
If you break it, you pay for it,
said Joe, and he walked into the store, shutting the door behind him. I walked inside, but Joe was nowhere to be found. I looked around, and there were still the customers and the green clowns. Eric and I looked at each other and ran through the store trying to find Joe. Joe! I yelled, but I couldn't seem to find him. I saw the same girl at the counter with the pink hair. She just kept ringing items up with no expression on her face.
Joe!
Eric called out, and then one of the clowns stopped us. Hey there! Better stop running through the store before you break something, or worse yet, get hurt. Where is Joe, my friend from yesterday? The clown just stared blankly at us. I rushed past him as I saw Joe go through the same door from yesterday. The door shut behind him, and I once again found myself unable to open it.
Let's go get help,
Eric said, and so we left the store. The two of us ran to find someone who could help us out. We went to the local police station, and when we got there, Eric and I ran straight up to the counter where there was an officer. Please, you have to help us. Something happened to our friend. The officer looked concerned and allowed us to explain our story. He seemed doubtful and told us to leave.
There is no such place as Mr. Funtime's Halloween extravaganza. I think you guys need to get home and stop trying to play pranks on the police before you get into real trouble.
Eric and I looked at each other defeated. We walked out of the station, and then we both decided to go back ourselves to see if we could try again to help Joe. Before we did, however, we stopped at his parents' house to see if he had come back. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong house, said Joe's mom as she shut the door. Eric and I were becoming panicked now, and were unsure what to do. It was like Joe never existed, the store never existed, and our story was growing colder by the second. We decided to go back to the store, but when we got back, there was no sign or trace that the once fun-filled extravaganza ever existed. We walked around the building and looked for a sign, any sign at all. We looked at the doors that were now boarded up with wood. The building that used to be our local mall looked exactly like it did before the pop-up shop moved in. We never saw Joe again after that, but I keep an eye out for Mr. Funtime's Halloween extravaganza in case it pops up somewhere else. Eric and I have each other, and we know what happened. The only thing that still bothers me is why didn't Joe's mom even recall his existence? That was last year, and just the other day, I had a ray of hope. I noticed the girl with the pink hair sitting on the sidewalk not far from where the store had been. She was smoking a cigarette, and she still had that same dead-eyed look on her face. I approached her and asked her about Joe. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about because I never worked in any Halloween store. I think you must have the wrong person. No, I'm sure of it. I stopped mid-sentence as I could see a tattoo on her forearm of a green clown with large black eyes. The clown's mouth was wide open, and there was a tattoo of Joe as he was being swallowed whole by a big green clown with razor-sharp teeth. I grabbed her arm to get a better look.
Hey, you break it, you pay for it.
It's a full moon on a Saturday, for crying out loud.
My brother Alex shouted over his spooky Halloween mix. His head periodically popped out of the plywood abomination covering his lawn like a human whack-a-mole.
There's no way I'm gonna miss it.
I sighed and zipped up my jacket. Even during the day, the early October wind was biting. Don't you think it's a bit much? I asked. No one is trick-or-treating this year.
I won't be outdone. The Hendersons are into it.
His hand whipped out of the maze and pointed aggressively to the yard across the street. The neighbor's intimidating display consisted of a single orange bag of leaves with a jack-o'-lantern face on the front. Every year, Alex adds new pieces to his already elaborate Halloween decorations. That creature had now evolved into this short maze, starting on the sidewalk and ostensibly ending at the front door. My sister-in-law gives out the candy, and Alex operates a new jump scare from somewhere within. I think this year he was a giant trapdoor spider or something. He even built a chicken door halfway through in case kids needed to bail. My brother has many interesting feelings about the holiday, one of which is that candy should be earned, and that the more of it he keeps for himself, the more he has won. I love him anyway. I felt a tug on my hand.
Can I go in yet, Dad?
Lily asked. I told her to hang on until Uncle Alex gave the all clear. He was still tearing through the maze, turning props around and throwing blankets over grislier scenes. If he wanted to use my 5-year-old as a test subject, he'd have to tone it down to the before 7 o'clock setting. Maybe he really thought he'd learn something from a test run, but I think he was just excited to share his passion with someone else. Lily hopped around in excitement. The cardboard discs sandwiching her threatened to fall apart with every jump. We had sat down one night and Googled costume ideas, but her mind was made up from the get-go. She insisted on being a button. Whatever, it was super easy, and her costume was already done a month ahead of the date. Celebratory sounds grew louder as my brother emerged from the entrance.
Okay, kiddo, are you ready?
Alex asked in a loopy ghost voice. Lily nodded and bolted forward.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Alex called.
It's dangerous to go alone.
He grinned at me as he untied a line of string. Out of the verge, a dummy Alex had intended to be a clown was propped up in a lawn chair. He made it from his clothes, stuffed with more clothes, and then threw a clown wig on it. I assumed he'd refine it before the big day. Right then, it was just a lump of laundry sporting a polka dot shirt and a wig. A single foil balloon was tied to the arm of the chair. Alex handed it to Lily, giving her this whole speech about how the balloon would keep her safe and how important it was to hang on to it. I liked this new touch. I think a lot of parents would get anxious sending their kids into a stranger's property where they can't see them. The balloons keep track of where everyone is and help to assuage those fears. Though I wondered if he considered who's supposed to give the balloons out. Alex told Lily to count to 30 and made for his hiding spot. I helped her count all the way to 30, and then she took off into the maze. I watched her balloon bob around. It would speed up abruptly or slow around corners. I heard a growl from a low-quality speaker ring out above the ambient Halloween music, followed by a little yelp from Lily. The balloon retreated and stopped. I could picture her gathering her courage. Sure enough, the balloon started making progress again. I stood on the sidewalk smiling to myself and shuffled my feet to stay warm. I was shocked to attention when I suddenly sensed movement nearby. I took a step back as 3 figures shambled past me without a word. I had been idly glancing around in boredom that entire time and hadn't seen them approach. The only car parked on the street was mine. I caught their profiles as they went. The person in the lead took great loping steps, throwing the weight of their bulky costume ahead of them. The torso was conversely thin with saggy skin. Thin hairs popped out of the top of their pale head. The middle one almost seemed to glide forward. Theirs was the least intricate costume, as they simply looked like someone hunched over in a burlap sack. I thought they must be on wheels, somehow. Trailing the trio was someone who looked to be attending a masquerade. I caught a flash of black contacts in the peripheral of their mask. They paid me absolutely no mind, like I wasn't even there. Must be friends of Alex's, I settled on. If anyone knew people who get that into Halloween so early, It was my brother. I was going to make a joke about needing more balloons, but they had already rounded the first corner of the maze. Lily's balloon was more than halfway through when I heard that growl again, tripped by the strangers. They must have been moving really fast, not exactly allowing time to stop and smell the corpses. Lily's balloon hit a straightaway near the end when I heard a startled squeak from her. The cry cut off abruptly, and the balloon wavered like a fishing bobber. It went end to end of that long corridor as if Lily was sprinting back and forth. It came to a halt and then just floated away. Lily had let go. I watched the balloon drift into the sky, feeling a cold sweat break out on my skin. The tense music from that stupid Halloween CD lent an air of ridiculousness to how I was feeling. "Lily?" I called out, trying to keep the concern from my voice. No response from anyone. "Lily?" I yelled into the first 5 feet of the maze. I heard wood scraping on wood off to my right. I ran to the edge of the maze and saw those 3 adult trick-or-treaters exiting through the chicken door. I expected them to say something, either to me or to each other, but they quietly made for the sidewalk. "Hey!" I shouted. The tall, pale one with the weird body stopped and turned to look at me. Their tiny yellow eyes narrowed even further in confusion. "Yeah, you!" I continued. "Who are you people?" The tall one looked around, its 2 wide mouth drawn in a grimace. The other 2 stopped on the sidewalk and waited for their companion. My eyes couldn't even focus on the one in the rough cloak. The tall one's gaze finally fell on the clown dummy behind me. It replaced the thin hairs on its head with bright red tufts sprouting from its scalp. Multicolored splotches broke out all over their body. With a look of satisfaction, it backed away again. What the hell?" I started. Noticing I was still upset with it, contentment gave way to rage as its massive mouth flashed into a snarl, baring countless grimy teeth. It roared and wobbled towards me. I fell back onto the grass and scrambled for the maze. Self-preservation screamed in tandem with concern for my daughter. I rammed into the flimsy plywood walls. I kept shouting Lily's name until everything was leveled. The world and I spun as I poured over the ruined decorations. It was impossible. Lily went in and I would have seen her come out. She had to be there. By the time I felt Alex shaking me back to my senses, the trio was gone. I collapsed when I found half of her button costume, the cardboard all mangled and torn, my mind reeling as to the origin of the tiny red flecks peppering the crumpled costume. Before the police put the curtains up, some neighbors came around to take pictures and tried to congratulate Alex on outdoing himself with the crime scene. We're still being questioned on Lily's disappearance, and apparently I'm being treated with a great deal of suspicion. The investigators are at least humoring bringing those trick-or-treaters in for questioning. Alex maintains he has no idea who they were and says that he never even saw them. The only theory I dare to hold is those 3 kidnapped Lily and concealed her as they escaped. And the transformation that thing went through, the way it seemed like a nocturnal predator caught in the light of day, that feeling I got that I shouldn't be able to look at them, I think it all comes back to our early Halloween activities. Halloween started for a reason, and I think we enjoyed the protection of our numbers provided. Similarly, I think they enjoyed the camouflage. I can only imagine the calamity when none of that happens this year. In 2nd grade, I decided I wanted to be a 2nd grade teacher. Not 1st grade, not 3rd, 2nd. At the time, wanting to teach that grade wasn't weird, but as the years went on, as I finished elementary school, then middle, then high, it really is pretty odd. I always knew I'd teach 2nd grade. This odd, specific occupational requirement never left, even when I actually did get through college and become a teacher. So that's where I am today, a 28-year-old single woman and a 2nd grade teacher of 4 years now. Or, I was. That's the problem. I was fired 2 months ago. The cute little school I worked at forever doesn't offer tenure, and I sincerely messed up. A mistake big enough to be fired immediately. The headmaster, that's what they call the principal at my charter school, told me himself he doesn't blame me, but with the angry parents' news coverage and investigations, it didn't really look good for the school to keep me. That's okay. I feel terrible for letting those kids see what they did. That's for later, though. It wouldn't make any sense. Yet. Let's just start with Halloween. Halloween was a big deal at the elementary school. Parties, decorations, a fall festival, you name it. Not a single wall of the school doesn't have some paper cutout of a witch or string of candy covering it. And for the 2 weeks leading up to Halloween, the teachers take turns selling apple cider after school to all the kids and parents picking them up. I was never honestly a very big Halloween person before teaching, but it really was fun. The school even gave each class a budget for Halloween parties. All I had to plan was 4 hours of party time. Fun, though admittedly not as easy as you'd think. Finding different activities to keep second graders busy without being too boring or too wild isn't simple. Yeah, I could have just put on a movie and let them play their own games the whole day, but I wanted to do something memorable, something fun. I came up with pumpkin carving. Yeah, I know. Carving pumpkins isn't the most original idea. Literally everybody already carves one for Halloween. But when I asked the class, most kids said their parents didn't let them help carve the pumpkin, just draw the face or clean out the guts. No actual carving. And they all seemed pretty excited when I told them they'd get to do it on Tuesday, Halloween. The school told me as long as the only things we used were those cheap $3 carving tools, they would let me send home a permission form to the parents. When the due date for the permission forms came, every single kid brought one in. Off to get the pumpkins. My budget, the one the school gave me, was enough for the decorations, some snacks, the carving kits, and probably half the pumpkins, but I knew I'd have to spend a bit out of my own pocket to buy the pumpkins. Yeah, I don't have much money, but I was willing to pay $70 for these kids to have a fun Halloween. Not to mention for them to remember me as the best second grade teacher ever. The cheapest place was a small patch I found online. Most pumpkins were under $5, which sounded great. My only hesitancy was with the reports of 3 missing people in that area. Recent reports. Disappearances aren't a big deal if you're with a friend, but for a lone woman in her 20s, I had to be careful, even if risking that area would mean less money from my own pocket. Initially, I found the pumpkin patch immediately. From the freeway I took to get there, the fields of green and orange were in my view. Only a thin fence separated me and the people wandering the fields. But after I pulled off and onto the road leading up, things got less simple. I'm a terrible driver, honestly, I really am. Even worse with directions. Despite seeing the field the whole time, I couldn't for the life of me find the entrance. I literally drove around the whole pumpkin patch twice, not able to find a way in. And when I finally stopped at the side of the road and figured out directions, a parade came down the road I needed to travel on. Apparently, some middle school was having their homecoming football game that night, right on the only road that led to the only pumpkin patch entrance. In short, a disaster. I was exhausted, it was getting late, the place was closing in less than 30 minutes, and I could do nothing but sit and watch a flock of 7th grade cheerleaders flounce in their sickeningly short skirts. Looking down the street, there was still at least half a mile of parade floats and kids in costumes. Oh, and Halloween was the next day. Fuck this, I whispered. My second graders would have to be content with Charlie Brown Halloween on repeat because I was done. Time to turn around and go home. Crap. Looking at the line of cars behind me, I realized there was no room to turn my car around. A truck, the scraped-up kind you see rednecks driving around, though with a hatch covering the back, was bumper to bumper with me, stopping me from reversing enough to avoid the parade in my U-turn. Great. Just great. This day was amazing. I got out of my car and walked up to the idiot who didn't know the whole leave people room at a stoplight thing. Hey, I'm trying to turn around, I said after he rolled down his window. Would you mind pulling back a bit? He inhaled sharp and pointed away from me. Then the man, the one wearing a cliché cowboy hat, turned and smiled. Not a polite smile. There was no goodwill, friendly neighbor attitude in his face. It wasn't even angry. The smile was cold and somehow just off.
You don't want to watch the parade?
He asked, slowly still smiling. His eyes gazed just a bit to the left of me. I was just trying to get into the patch, but there's no way I'll get to it in time now. It closes in a half an hour. The man blinked.
The parade will be done in 15 minutes. Run in and grab a pumpkin.
Yeah, well, I need 30 of them. Really, I was just wondering if you could reverse a few feet so I could...
30?
The smiling man let out a long, high whistle.
30 pumpkins the day before Halloween? Girl, what you need all those for?
Then he started laughing, a laugh just as unhinged as his smile, just wrong. Without seeing a mirror, I knew red was creeping up the edges of my face. It really was ridiculous I'd waited this long. I know, I think I stuttered. It was just for my class. I'm a teacher and my second graders... Why are you laughing so much? Not to be rude, but I'm not in a great mood as it is.
Girl, I ain't laughing at you. I'm laughing at the odds.
The odds?
The odds that a pretty young thing like yourself would be looking for 30 pumpkins the same night I happen to be getting rid of 3 dozen.
My head cocked. The flush creeping into my face abated. What? He pushed his car door open and jumped out, laughing his head off still. It was then I knew, for a fact, even if this man could drive a car, even if he could hold a conversation, something in his head was distinctly not right. Some condition, some mental handicap. It didn't stop me from following him around the back of his car and watching as he popped his trunk. The hatch had obscured the insides before, but now they were fully visible, revealing dozens of small round orange gourds. Pumpkins, just like he said. He picked one up without saying anything and walked to my car. This was too weird. Wait, I called out and raced after him. You're just giving these to me?
Yep. Now pop open your trunk. We only got a few minutes to load all these before the parade is over.
For honestly, at least 10 seconds, I just stood, flustered, unsure how to react to this bizarre turn of events. Then, I started loading. Who cared if this man was odd, if it got my second graders a great Halloween party? If he was going to throw them away anyways. None of the things were big, each smaller than a soccer ball, but they were perfect for my kids. The only odd thing as I carried them was the tops. The pumpkins weighed about as heavy as they should without being cleaned out, but the top incision, the one around the stem that let you pull out the top like a lid, was done. On all of them. Are the insides clean? I shouted as he loaded the final pumpkin into my noticeably sunken down van. In the distance, the final parade float was nearing. He shook his head.
The guts are inside.
Somehow I randomly had ended up with 36 perfect-sized pumpkins with the tops already cut out and no charge at all. This was amazing. Thank you so much, I told the man. He winked and his smile grew wider, eerily wide.
No, thank you.
By the way, why were you throwing them away? Though his eyes had never fully made contact, this time he really was looking at something behind me.
The parade is over. We should get back in our cars.
He was right. I slammed my truck closed, got in my car and turned right. He turned left, and that was it. The end of my interaction with the strange off man. The next day, as my kids began pouring into my classroom, I could tell they were excited. The way they smiled at one another, wiggled in their seats, and slung their backpacks onto the floor was all more exuberant than normal. I couldn't blame them. I was the same. Everybody ready? I called out as I was met with a chaotic chorus of, yes! We laid out black trash bags over the table and cut holes in the top and sides of them to get into handmade aprons. Each kid stood obediently in front of their pumpkin with a spoon in hand, ones I had told them to bring. They were ready to scoop out the innards. Okay, I finally said. Let's start. For 1 minute, one blissful minute, I was proud of myself. Look at me organizing all this and making my kids happy. I was a great teacher. Nothing could go wrong. Then came the red. Realizing the truth was the oddest part. It didn't happen suddenly. It hardly even happened at all. Really, it was just confusing. Why were kids suddenly screaming? Why were multiple of them puking over the carpet? What was going on? And why was there red? Dazed, I forced myself to the nearest pumpkin and stared inside. No. Inside the orange pumpkin, where a mass of string seeds and pumpkin guts should have been, was something very, very different. A heart. A human one, covered in intestines and blood. Each pumpkin was the same. The smiling man had told me the truth. Guts are still inside. When the police came, they matched the DNA to the 3 people who had gone missing in the pumpkin patch area. I was fired the next day. I think it's finally time that I write this down. It's haunted me for years, but maybe this will help me move on. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what happened that night. I was 15. My girlfriend, her brother, my best friend, and I had come up with the brilliant idea to stay out all night on Halloween. We had the perfect plan. My friend Art, not his real name, and I would tell our parents that we were going to spend the night at Layla and Will's, not their real names, house. Likewise, Layla would tell her parents that she and Will would be spending the night at my house. I know it was stupid, but we were confident that our plan would work. I wish the plan had failed. That Halloween night, we set out, feeling like total rebels. We'd all decided on a group costume, and each of us was dressed as a DC superhero. Will had dressed as Superman, Art was the Flash, Layla was Supergirl, and I was Batgirl. We were all pumped. We had the whole night to stuff our faces with candy, hang out, and do whatever we wanted to do. After we trick-or-treated for about 3 hours, I'm not kidding, people started shutting their doors. By 12, there wasn't a single light on or door open. We 4 were the only people out on the street, and with the exception of a barking dog, there was no noise. Layla and I were bored and asked if we should just go home. Will refused.
You're at a sleepover at my house, remember? And I'm sleeping at yours. Do you want to be the one to admit to your mom that you lied? Come on, Will.
Art spoke up. He'd been eating a lot of candy and had been pretty quiet for the last few minutes, likely battling a massive stomachache.
This isn't as fun as you said it would be. Maybe it'd be better if we just went home and told the truth. They'll be mad, but maybe we can still have an actual sleepover.
Will looked at each of us and realized that he was the only one who wanted to stay out. He sighed and looked like he was about to relent. Then he looked behind us, and his face lit up like a jack-o'-lantern.
What's that?
He said excitedly, already beginning to move towards it. I turned around. Not 20 feet away was a house that I'd never seen before in our street. It looked like a typical townhouse. That's usually what you see in our neighborhood. But it was covered from porch to chimney with Halloween decorations. And not the cheap plastic ones you get at the dollar store, but the quality makes you want to run decorations that give kids nightmares. There were 2 disturbingly lifelike pumpkin-headed scarecrows guarding the front gate, and over 24 skeletons standing at attention in the front yard. Jack-o'-lanterns dotted the porch, each one with a face frozen in agony. A gigantic spider was perched in the show window, looking like it intended to make the shrub it was hovering over its next meal. Bones were scattered across the roof as if someone had just dropped a handful of them from the sky. And for the finishing touch, a spotlight hidden among the shrubbery made the entire house glow an eerie purple. Layla and I glanced at each other. How had we not seen this house earlier? Granted, we hadn't been paying close attention to every house we passed, but still, we'd been all over town. We'd have noticed a glowing purple house, right? I turned to ask Art, but he was as entranced as Will. Before I could blink, he was running towards the house too. Once again, I glanced at Layla. She shrugged her shoulders as if asking what I expected from 2 Halloween-crazed boys. I grabbed her hand and we ran after them. Up close, the house was even more disturbing. The scarecrows eyed us as we walked through the front gate. I tried not to gag as I passed them. Someone had certainly taken liberties to make the yard believable. The things stank like rotting pumpkins. I gripped Layla's hand a little tighter as we passed the skeletons. They must be from one of those expensive artisan websites, I thought. They sure didn't look fake. We walked up the porch steps with Will shaking from excitement. Art's eyes were practically glowing. I remember wondering, half jokingly, if they were in some kind of a trance. Will rang the doorbell. It was the sound of a church bell and resonated throughout the house.
Trick or treat!
We shouted dutifully, although Layla was practically crushing my hand. I was grateful for it. I needed to know that I wasn't the only one who found all of this unsettling. The door was practically thrown open. A gorgeous woman stood in the doorway. She had long legs, thick copper hair that stopped at her shoulders, black eyeliner, and blood-red lipstick. She was dressed in a revealing witch costume and grinned when she saw the 4 of us. Well, when she saw the boys. My, I didn't expect to be visited by 2 handsome heroes tonight. She gave a high-pitched giggle. Her voice reminded me of how ladies in old gangster movies talked. Art smiled and thanked her. Will was just staring at her. I took a step closer to Layla. That's when the lady noticed us. I think she knew immediately that we weren't as captivated as the boys were, not by her house or her beauty. Sure, she was gorgeous, but she was an adult and I was already with Layla. Her eyes glazed over us as she saw us, but her smile didn't waver. I noticed that she was holding a bowl of candy. She slowly extended it to me. "Candy, Batgirl?" I wrapped both of my arms around Layla and took a step backwards from the lady. I could tell she wanted something, and that it wasn't anything good. No thanks. We've eaten too much candy already." It wasn't even a lie. We'd eaten half her candy throughout the evening. The woman's smile wavered, and she blinked 3 times as if it was the last thing she'd expected. I noticed something strange about her eyes. They were kind of cloudy. She turned and offered candy to the boys. Will took a full handful while Art only took 2, obviously still suffering from a stomachache. I glanced again at the candy. The pieces weren't in wrappers, and it didn't look like any brand I'd ever seen. It sort of resembled malted milk balls, except bigger and lumpier. When the boys had finished their candy, the woman looked at all 4 of us. "You must be parched. Why don't you come in for some apple cider?" She gestured to the front door, which stood gaping open like a mouth. Layla physically leaned away from the door. She wouldn't go in there for $1,000, let alone a glass of cider. I agreed with her. I forced a smile. No, thank you." We turned around and started to get down off the porch when I realized that Layla and I were alone. Will and Art were gone, and so was the woman. My heart rate tripled. They went in the house. My stomach hurt. Should we call the police? What would we say? That a pretty lady with a spooky yard had lured 2 boys into her house with apple cider? Even if that didn't sound crazy, we were 2 teenagers out past midnight on Halloween. Not exactly what the cops would consider trustworthy. Plus, we couldn't prove that she wanted to hurt the boys. Still, we had to make sure that they were okay. We started walking around the house. On the left side, there weren't any windows. This made sense, though, it being a townhouse and all. The back of the house had a porch, but the windows and doors were all covered. The right side of the house yielded the same results as the left, leaving us only one option, the show window. We maneuvered around the skeletons in the yard and went as close as we dared up to the window. I, being dressed in black and thus harder to see, decided to look in the window while Layla, dressed in bright red and blue, made sure the lady didn't come out of the house. Before peering in, I took an uneasy glance at the giant spider. Against my better judgment, I touched it. Solid plastic. I sighed and told myself not to be so jumpy. I peered through the window. I was staring at a lit fireplace. It seemed to be the only light source in the room. It was pretty dim in there. Still, I could make out 2 enormous armchairs on either side of the fireplace. I could make out Art's bright red Flash costume, and could see the blue from Will's costume. They were both slumped in the chairs, as if asleep. There was a coffee table between the chairs, holding 2 half-empty glasses of what could only be apple cider. In the center of the room stood the lady. She was standing up straight as a rod, her arms lifeless at her sides. Then, with no warning, her right arm shot straight up. She held it there for a second and then let it fall. A second later, she did it again with the other arm. Then, I swear, she started glowing. As if this was the signal, Will and Art got up. I could tell that their eyes were closed, but they came right over to her. She put her left index finger on Art's forehead and her right index finger on Will's forehead, and she began to chant.
Venenium sentiam, age pure, langorium santias, nescio cudomo lantiam loquai, ut allegent.
All 3 of them suddenly began to convulse. Art went down, followed by Will. They both started to kick wildly. Then their kicks became weaker, as if they were losing energy. Then they stopped. I must have made a noise. Layla told me later that tears were streaming down my face. I must have sobbed without knowing it, because the lady turned around. Her eyes were completely blue with no pupils to be seen. Her mouth was hanging open with saliva the color of her eyes dripping from her lips, and her face was starting to melt. I screamed. Layla screamed. I shoved myself away from the window and landed flat on my back. The wind was knocked out of me, but I was too scared to care. Layla yanked me to my feet and we just started running. We charged through the skeletons, which I now thoroughly believed were real. As we charged through the gate, I knocked over one of the scarecrows. Its head smashed to bits on the ground, revealing a human skull underneath. We ran, not knowing where we were going and not caring. We finally ended up in front of my house, and we both collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing. I told my mom everything. At first, she thought I was making up a story to get out of lying to her, but one look at our faces and she knew we were serious. She called the cops immediately. When they investigated the strange house, they made a shocking discovery. It belonged to a Mrs. Smith, not her real name, who was a woman in her 20s and fit our descriptions, but she'd been on vacation in Alabama with her mother for the last 2 days. They never found their bodies. Art and Will remain missing to this day. The police don't believe our account of some life-sucking witch. They believe that a child predator drugged them and ran off with them. I don't think Layla and I ever really got over it. We broke up in 12th grade when she and her family moved away for a fresh start. A few months later, I moved too. We text now and then, but we aren't as close as we used to be. Still, I'm glad I saved her number all of these years, because tonight I saw something that brought back that traumatic Halloween. A townhouse, bathed in purple light, with skeletons set up in the front yard. 2 of them guard the gate. One is dressed in a Superman costume, the other is dressed as the Flash.
Peter, grab the locks from the garage, and hurry, we only have 2 hours left.
I came back to Earth rather quickly and hustled towards the garage. That's when I heard a loud gunshot a few blocks away. I walked down the steps and flipped the light switch on in the garage. While I reached out for the locks, that's when it hit me. Tonight was Hallows' Eve. You see, our town every year has a tradition. I'd call it more a curse, but that's beside the point. Every single year on Halloween, something enters our town and takes 6 children for every 6 blocks. 3 boys, 3 girls. There's no way to stop the curse except to avoid it at all costs. Lock your doors and board up the windows because this thing isn't human. That's all we know, simply because we've never had anyone who lives to tell us the tale of what truly is out there. I noticed these strange things happening around Halloween when I was 12 years young. I was laying down trying to fall asleep. It couldn't have been more than an hour until I heard the yelling coming from my parents. While I was sitting in my bed trying to make out what they were arguing about, my dog creaked open the door. I saw my dog walk down the steps and suddenly their voices became clear. I heard my mother say, "Michael, we can't be here tomorrow. It's happening. Don't you remember?" My dad retorted,
Of course I do, Linda. You don't think I'd send him to Jim's? Obviously I would, but no. Someone had to book a last-minute vacation and never thought to tell a damn soul, not even their goddamn brother.
"Jim? Uncle Jim?" He was talking about how every year I go to my cousin's for Halloween. My mother responded calmingly, "It's going to be okay, Michael. There's always a solution. Peter and I will go down to the storm shelter tomorrow night. You'll stay up here and watch over the house. He'll be inside. There's no need to worry." I started to slowly inch my way towards the stairs when I heard a knock on the door. Father spoke loudly.
Who is it?
He started to walk towards the door when another 3 knocks banged loudly against my door. I heard a man speak from behind the door.
Deputy Sheriff's Department. Anyone home?
As I glanced around the wall, I saw a tall man with a shiny badge standing at the front door. He spoke.
How's it going tonight? I'm just stopping by to make sure y'all will stay inside tomorrow night because you know how things go around here. We don't want you going anywhere, so feel free to call the station if you have any questions or require any assistance tomorrow night. Anywho, have a good night now.
He shot a look over towards me before stepping off our front porch, which didn't much help, considering my nerves and anxiety were going through the roof currently. Dad closed the front door after wishing the officer a safe night. Tomorrow would be my very first Halloween in this little town since Kyle and Garrett are in the Bahamas. Like I mentioned earlier, I spend Halloween with my cousins every year, who only live a few hours south from here. I loved when I would go there because they live in a full candy bar type of neighborhood. You know the type. Rich yuppies every so often, mini mansions and sports cars around every turn. Also, my cousins are more akin to siblings to me, since I'm an only child. I would rather go over there any time of the day than sit 5 more minutes in this creepy old town. The reason I'm documenting my experience here is for no other purpose than a warning. Don't try to search for this wicked town. Your intentions may be good, but you'll walk out of this place with more suffering than you thought was human. I mean it too. You'll feel it as soon as you pass by that damn welcome sign. It sneaks up on you like a cobra in the forest. You'll feel it crawl up your body and sink into your chest. The best way I can describe it is if you've been running down a dark tunnel for miles, but you haven't moved an inch. Mark my words when I tell you this. For anyone out there that wants to visit this wicked town, don't. That very night, my dad took his keys off the kitchen counter and hurried out the front door to go somewhere urgently. I woke up to a bunch of commotion downstairs. It sounded like a hammer banging up against a wall. Yawning, I rubbed my eyes and stretched my arms up. I got up and went over to my parents' room to see my mother getting ready for the day. I looked at her and asked, "What's Dad doing downstairs?" She replied with, "Oh, honey, he's just doing some work on the house for tonight, that's all." She patted my shoulder, reassuring me. Halloween is tonight. What work needs to be completed for Halloween? Decorating? I walked downstairs to look beyond the wall, and I saw my dad boarding up the front door. I was certainly confused on what he was doing because what type of work for Halloween requires boards of wood shutting the front door off from the outside? I quickly acknowledged this and yelled over the banging, "Hey, Dad! Why are you locking us out?" Thinking to myself, I was confused. How would I be able to leave tonight to go trick-or-treating? After a moment, he replied with,
Not out, in. I'm sure your little mind is very confused because your mother and I haven't explained what's wrong with this town to you yet.
I didn't even know what all of this meant, only being 12. I just wanted to go out and trick-or-treat. Last year was so fun, and now my parents are taking it away from me? All I want is some candy, and for some strange reason, my dad is boarding up our house. I asked, "What do you mean, wrong? What's wrong with this town?" My father must have smelled concern dripping off me like a towel after being submerged in water. What was he locking us in from? He paused for a moment.
Let me explain. Every Halloween, something evil comes out in this town. It hides in the shadows within these streets and will wait to prey on 6 children for every 6 blocks until it reaches the end of our town. Last year they counted 18 missing. Nobody knew what was taking the children because no one has ever set eyes on it and lived on till the next morning to inform us.
As the sunlight turns pale on All Hallows Eve, remember this: you are never alone. My 12-year-old brain could only compensate for so much. One thing stood out to me, though. There was only 3 hours till sunset. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that my father was locking us inside with plywood boards all over our windows and doors now. What is it with this strange town? I never really believed in monsters as a child, but now my parents believe something quite equal to that is out there. There's no way to get around this curse our town has. It's possessed with something that is far from human. I wanted to see what everyone was so scared of. I wanted to see this monster. It was almost 4 at this point, and my mother made Father and I our favorite meal, a pastrami sandwich. I was parched after devouring my lunch, and my mother's famous iced tea suited the purpose. I was merely 2 sips away from finishing my drink when my father yelled from the other room,
Peter, grab the locks from the garage, and hurry, we only have 2 hours left.
As the sun drifted away into darkness, the night crept upon the horizon, welcoming the evil in. My dad locked up the garage door and bolted 6 plywood boards upon the door into the house from the garage. He went to talk to my mother about something I'm not quite sure of. Then I heard my mother say, "Peter, honey, let's go downstairs now. Your father is going to stay up here for the night to make sure nothing happens to us. I'll cook us a meal for later while you get your things ready for the night." I walked up the stairs to see my dog laying on top. I told him to come into my room and close the door. Looking out the window, I saw the sun setting. There was a purple blue sky just over the sun's blissful orange corona. I stood there with my dog looking up at me a few minutes, just admiring the sunset. I wasn't worried about tonight, nor frightful. No, quite the opposite. I felt this overwhelming sense of curiosity of what was upon the horizon. It almost felt as if something was pulling me towards whatever it was. It started happening just moments after I saw that green burst of light you see just after the sun sets. This feeling inside of me gifted me with courageous amounts of inquisitiveness. Something was boiling up in my head to go outside, and I just had to. Something sparked in my head. The key. I knew where the spare key was for the side door. If I could get that, I would be able to leave the house. The only problem is, my father will notice if I leave. I grabbed a sleeping bag and a few pillows downstairs. I dragged the sleeping bag all the way down to the basement while fighting with my dog Max, since he kept biting the back of the sleeping bag. I walked past the kitchen, getting a whiff of the amazing chicken pot pie my mother just cooked. I hadn't had much thought on how I would get out tonight, but I did know how to get the key. It was on top of the refrigerator, so I climbed on top of the countertop next to the fridge. Feeling around the top of the refrigerator, I grabbed a few dust bunnies and the key. It was now dark, and I heard my mother calling me. "Peter, it's time. I have your meal down here. We need to shelter in place." I heard my father walking down the stairs and shoved the key in my pocket. I was always a pretty good liar, so when he abruptly asked what I was doing, I said, "Getting some water for us." I reached out towards the kitchen sink to turn it on. He replied with,
All right now, after that, get on down there with your mother.
I smiled and took 2 glasses of water down to the basement where I met with my dog Max and mother. I handed her a glass of water and said, "I'm pretty hungry after smelling those remnants in the kitchen you left." She laughed and said, "I set up a table for us over there." She pointed towards the other side of the basement. I saw a candle with a dimly lit flame on top of an old wooden table. It was passed down by my great-grandmother. The table was an antique. I always remember my mother saying not to touch it because I would get my fingerprints on it. I was shocked she was letting me eat dinner on it. I gave her a hug and sat down. Over this meal, I ever so slightly kept feeling that urge in the back of my mind. I kept envisioning what was outside on this cold night. I finished up my meal, dropping some leftovers to Max. It was probably a few hours into the night at this point, and now that inquisitiveness I felt earlier was dwelling inside of me. It was like the anticipation a child has to wake their parents up on Christmas morning. I told myself that this feeling must be acted on. I wanted to be rebellious and be the first to figure out what this creature was. I developed a plan in my head. I asked my mother, "Hey Mom, I need to go to the bathroom. Can I go upstairs?" She glanced over at me and debated for a minute. "Yes, please hurry though," gesturing for me to go. I got up from my seat and walked up the creaky stairs. I unlocked the basement door to the main floor. My dad was sitting over near the front door overlooking the front yard. He was peeking out the blinds when he noticed me.
Boy, what are you doing up here?
He yelled. I need to go to the bathroom. Mom told me to tell you she needs to use the phone."
Okay, just give me a minute. I'll be right back.
He got up from his seat and walked towards the basement door. This was my one shot to get out. I ran towards the side door to the house and unbolted the 6 locks and took the key from my pocket to insert it into the keyhole. I turned it, and a stimulating sense of adrenaline shot through my veins as I stepped foot outside into the night. I was running down the street, rotating my head to see both sides of the road with houses boarded up like some ghost town. That's when I heard it for the first time. It was this piercing tone that pulsates its way through your body. I felt the hairs on my body rise as I keened in on where the sound was coming from. It was in the direction of my school. I wanted to stay hidden, so I took a longer way, which took me on the park path. It would take 15 minutes to walk to the school from the way I was taking, and I was 5 minutes away when I had my first encounter with that thing. I heard it snickering, sending a sudden jolt of terror-induced goosebumps. I got low to the ground. I heard it a few yards to the right of me. It was pitch black out, and you can only hear a few crickets here and there. As soon as the thing made a noise, every other creature in the vicinity went quiet. It played that high-pitched snicker multiple times until it just stopped abruptly. I looked up to see if I could make anything out when I heard something else that caught my attention. I heard someone yelling in the distance. This creature must have heard it before I did because it went quiet. It took me a few tries to get exactly what the person was saying. It was definitely a male repeating something over and over again. Oh no. It was my father. He called out to me.
Peter, come home! Peter, come out!
He was on the opposite path to the school, which was on the main road a few blocks from my house. There was a little forest in between us currently, but if I could get to the school, it wraps around. I also knew if I yelled out, this thing would find me. I got up and started to run. I was only 5 minutes away, and if I ran, I could make it there. My plan was to get inside the school, take a shortcut, exit the school, and reconnect with my dad. As the wind rushed past my face as I ran, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was in the field to the right of me, not even 15 feet away. I saw this thing hunched over, peeking its muscular neck out for me. Its black eyes glistened in the moonlight. That's all I needed to see for my legs to move just a little faster. I could see the school in my view at this point, so I turned back to see if I was being chased. Nothing but the blank pit of darkness which consumed the night. The door was locked from the inside. I needed a plan B. I looked around, but my hearing is what helped me that night. I heard my dad yell to the right of the building, so I headed that way. Right before I turned the corner to meet my dad, I heard that high-pitched tone that chilled you down to the bone. I felt some evil upon us, and I turned the corner to see my dad staring behind me. I looked at him with confusion, and that's when I sensed something behind me. We were all in the middle of that courtyard, and I asked, "Dad, I'm scared. What should I do?" He put his arm out and gestured a down motion for me to get to the ground. I understood this immediately and did what I was told. I got down on all fours and laid on the ground. That's when I heard it.
"This boy is righteously mine. I shall take him back to my home."
Its tongue slithered in a way that lisped its words. It sounded almost like a snake, but humanoid. I was still turned away facing my dad when I saw him reach onto his back with both hands. I heard something click when he began to speak.
You won't take my son, you monster! Go back to hell!
My dad then pulled a pistol out from his back and aimed it at the creature. He didn't think twice about pulling the trigger. All I remember next was hearing that awful screech again, then hearing my dad in agony. He started screaming, and I smelled burnt flesh. I saw this thing attaching itself, burning my father's skin off his head right in front of me. This monster was morphing into my father, shifting and contorting his muscles, seizing his brain and burning his flesh off, all while it said in that alienatic, emotionless voice,
"Peter's next. Peter's next. Peter's next."
My dad, with what little control he had left of his body, took the pistol and raised it to his mouth and shoved it down his throat and pulled the trigger. With all of this commotion, the courtyard's lights flickered on, and this creature began to flare up into a flame as the light shined down on it. I saw its veins spurt black liquid out as it died in agony. Its mouth was the last thing to ever move on it, and this sick demon said,
"See you next Halloween, Peter."
This all left me utterly speechless, as it would anyone. I sat there for hours until the police found me in my catatonic state. The reports show that they found me up against a wall that had black liquid smeared all over the walls that read, "Free me." I don't remember much of what happened after this, but my mother called the police after neither my father nor I showed up. Nobody believes me when it comes to that night. They locked me up at our local psychological rehabilitation center. They call me a sicko. Trust me, I wouldn't make this stuff up. The damn courts didn't believe me when I told them about the monster that killed my father. I was determined clinically insane with a year of inpatient rehab. I was allowed 1 hour of supervised internet access each day. I used this to my advantage and wrote this all down for you. I hope someone believes me because this post is my only option left. Apparently, the police say they never found my dad's body. All that was found at the crime scene was that black sludge and a boy in shock from witnessing his father's murder. I've made myself pretty comfortable in here at the hospital. After the first couple of weeks of hearing the often screams coming from the loonies down the hall, you get used to it. I actually made some friends while here. The only thing that makes me want to tear down that door is hearing that sick demon whispering down the hall at night. It only happens every so often, but when it does, I cover my ears with my pillow and hope it's not really there. Sometimes I'll be sitting eating that disgusting lunch they give us, and upon all the chattering, I hear it. It comes from the vents sometimes, or just outside the window where you can't see. Sometimes I even think I see him when I'm really drowsy after all the meds they give us here. He just sits there at the end of my hall, just waiting for me. I was sentenced to a full year the day after Halloween. Today marks the first day of October, which means he'll be back. I have to get out of here or I'll be killed just like my father was. Maybe I just should have remained hidden.
"See you next Halloween, Peter."
Years ago, a boy and his family lived on their corn farm just 15 minutes out of a small town, and they loved Halloween. Every year, they'd grow their cornfields to absolute perfection, and they'd also grow a pumpkin patch for the town and turn 100 out of their 300 acres into a corn maze. The maze had creepily carved pumpkins and scarecrows throughout. Kids from the high school and other townfolk would be volunteers to jump out and give you a scare or candy. It'd always be completed by the first day of October and stayed open until the 2nd of November. The boy was a simple, quiet, nice teenager who kept to himself at school, but He was rather handsome, so all the girls always flirted with him, all the popular girls. This created enemies for him, although he never cared for popularity or any of the conventional teenage desires. He only ever cared for his parents, Halloween, and his dream to become a professional holiday decorator. Having and not having those desires in a town dominated by mostly football made him a freak. The only exception was having his eyes set on a girl, one who was to him the only girl in school, in the whole town, that was beautiful. She had short black hair, circle-framed glasses, was tan, had freckles, and was just as tall as him. She always listened to music, wrote or drew stories, and was always alone. They had a couple of classes together, worked together on assignments, and passed each other in the halls every now and then. He never learned her whole life story, but he learned enough to know he liked her. Her name was Chelsea. All sophomore year, he worked up the courage to talk to her and ask her out, but on the day he was going to do it, that morning, his father died from a heart attack and he stopped going to school to help with the farm and to help his mother. Within the next 2 years, his mother went insane in her grief, claiming that the farm was cursed because, ever since his great-grandfather, every man of the house had died of a heart attack around the same age. But you can't really believe her if you knew how they ate. He was left all alone, but since he was 18, the land and the house became his. Even though he was left alone, that year he made the greatest corn maze for the town on Halloween. When working on it, though, he was visited by many family friends. At his request, neighbors came with food, a helping hand to tend to the land, and to help set up the Halloween celebration. Meanwhile, family in and out of the state only came just to see if he wanted to sell the land. Men in suits from various companies came as well. They hounded him almost every day of the week. He ignored them all as best he could, but he was slowly losing his patience. When October was close by again, the last person he'd ever expect visited him. Chelsea, all alone with a bag filled with what he could only assume from the smell was food, and she had a smile on her face and was blushing. Turns out she always liked him too, but was just afraid to talk to him. "I've been wanting to come and see you, but the farm was always swarming with people, and I am not very good with strangers or crowds." They had lunch together and had a wonderful time, and she ended up helping him with the pumpkin patch and the corn maze every day and night for the next month until it was done. When it was done, he asked her out to dinner on the night before Halloween. She said yes. Seeing how well the date went and how good it made him feel to be away from the farm and in the company of someone that wasn't trying to take his land or get in his pants for bragging rights, he decided to celebrate Halloween at her house, leaving the maze and patch under the supervision of his father's closest friend and his family. With the help of his father's cop buddies, as well as their kids, who all chaperoned, the night went well for both houses. He got his first kiss, and his maze raised enough money to pay off the bills for a while. A week after that year's Halloween, the town's all-star cheerleader was declared missing and was found dead in his maze, buried partially by dirt and covered in broken, discarded pumpkins. The autopsy found that she had been sexually assaulted by multiple attackers and then murdered. Of course, the town all pointed fingers at the teenager, but the cops proved his innocence with his girlfriend and her family and many other witnesses. A year went by and Halloween came around again. However, barely anyone showed up. Disappointed and no longer in the spirit for the holiday, he canceled the maze and stayed home alone. Unfortunately, he did have visitors who came late at night. The night before Halloween, a couple of teens came to his house and they beat him to death. Halloween night, they went back to set everything on fire to rid the evidence from both of their crimes. After a week of searching, the police finally figured out that the now missing jocks had gone to the maze Halloween night, and they found what was left of them and their crimes. They had been torn to pieces, and their limbs were found inside the once happy pumpkins that now had sinister faces and mouths and were covered in human blood. The authorities thought it to be a serial killer after they all saw a scarecrow with a bloody smile, boots, and claws covered in blood standing before them. They were going to give chase, but it roared at them, revealing 2 rows of sharp teeth covered in blood before disappearing into the night. They searched the entire land with dogs, even a helicopter, but nothing was ever found. There was a funeral for the boy, the cheerleader, and the jocks, all closed caskets, of course. The police never linked the jocks to the cheerleader, and they never bothered to clear the boy's name, whom of which they now suspected was the killer. Instead, they chalked up a story that would please the town and their votes for the sheriff. The story is as follows. The farmer boy had killed the cheerleader the night before Halloween after inviting her over, and the jocks went and got themselves killed, committing vigilante justice. Heroes is what they were called. Every year the patch and maze is always made and is always taken down at the exact same time and manner as before. Yet, Chelsea nor her family do anything to make this happen. She doesn't have the heart to bring herself to do it without him. No one believes her though, and everyone thinks she does it for attention. Ever since then, year after year, members, lawyers, land developers, and many townsfolk all went to the farm and tried to take it, but he left it in Chelsea's name. Lawyer after lawyer that set foot on that farm never left it. They were all found in the same condition as the jocks. The cops kept it secret as best as they could to prevent a panic of a serial killer on the loose, but people are people, and people talk. Legends and rumors started, and then began the yearly dares. Every year, cocky teenagers trying to prove their manhood go missing, and the cops are too afraid to look for them. Soon, the town became quiet, and only the stubborn, stupid, or the heartbroken stayed. Only one person has gone to the farm and made it out unharmed. Chelsea. One thing that I find hilarious about this time of year is that there's no actual pumpkin in pumpkin spice. The spice combination itself is a derivative of a pudding known as pumpkin. Pumpkin itself does not contain pumpkin either. Sometime in the 13th century, someone called a pudding pumpkin, and through 800 years of a telephone game, we have gas station coffee being sold for an extra $1 and being called pumpkin spice. I must look like an antisocial prick when I break from the social norm and order a venti caramel macchiato. I'll stand in line at the local Starbucks and wait to order the same cup of coffee I've ordered every weekday morning since I started working this crappy desk job. Everyone in front of me will order some variation of pumpkin spice only for the barista to look at me like I just dropped a turd in the coffee pot when I ask for something different. It's always the same ordeal. Some kid with a liberal arts degree that ended up slinging caffeine to attempt to make a dent in their student debt ends up trying to upsell me into a pumpkin spice latte. This year seems especially bad. Everyone is eating pumpkin spice cookies and dipping them in their pumpkin spice coffee only to walk around with pumpkin spice body spray as they burn pumpkin spice incense. It's reached a point that I honestly can't help but hope some catastrophic storm would simultaneously hit New Guinea and India, leaving the world completely devoid of nutmeg. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. So, 50 years ago, some idiot got it in his head that he was going to revitalize downtown by hollowing out some of the buildings that surrounded the old courthouse and turning them into an office complex. If you walk around on the sidewalk, you'll see a bunch of cute little shops and chain restaurants, but upstairs, the entire block of buildings has been turned into a cubicle farm, where I have ended up, assigned to Unit 355. My desk and work area is a 5-foot by 5-foot box with just enough room for a desk, a few filing cabinets, and an office chair I am convinced was designed by Marquise de Sade. Every weekday from 9 in the morning until 5 at night, I am expected to spend a third of each day sifting through expense reports and customer invoices looking for errors. Sounds boring, right? Wait until you've been doing it for 10 years. Last year, our employer realized my job could literally be handled by software, and my job description went from actually looking for errors to making sure the software they dropped an easy $1 million on was actually doing its job. I literally get paid to sit in my cubicle and watch a computer do the job I was hired to do. Even though I work in a position that could best be described as redundant, I am expected to spend all that time keeping a keen eye on the screen. Managers walk the rows of cubicles like prison guards looking for anyone dumb enough to check their Facebook or browse Reddit on the job. Even if they tried, the corporate firewall is more restrictive than an overprotective mother in a bad neighborhood. My cubicle is of particular interest to these middle managers who only exist to drain anything that resembles fun out of our lives. Last week, someone sent out an email to the entire floor that said Milo, the manager with a heart of shit, had been using the 5-minute break he had after doing a walkthrough through the cubicle farm to duck into the manager's bathroom to rub one off while reading a copy of Mein Kampf. As much as I'd like to take credit for the email itself, I had nothing to do with it. Still, seeing as I was the only office worker without a paper pumpkin tacked up to my cubicle, I was the first person they descended on. If it wasn't bad enough that I have to sit here and pretend I give a shit about these invoices and reports, I have no less than 3 failures of a human evolution peering over my shoulder at any given time to make sure I'm not sending malicious emails. It didn't come out of nowhere. Last month, they opted to replace the half-and-half creamer in the break room with this off-brand pumpkin spice they had bought in bulk. I can't stand the stuff personally, so I opted to drink my coffee black. Well, that didn't sit well with the overlords, so the following week they replaced the coffee itself with pumpkin spice. Realizing I couldn't get an inch of headway with those control freaks, I opted to bring a thermos with me to work. When they finally banned outside food or drink from the office, I ended up writing an open letter to management asking if we had recently been sponsored by the nutmeg industry and if they'd like some actual work to be done alongside their pumpkin spice enemas. I received my first write-up in 10 years and was told another infraction would result in my termination. Even though I didn't author the email that called out Milo, they made no secret about the fact they wanted me gone after that whole debacle. If that wasn't bad enough, I had to spend 8 hours a day surrounded by an office staff that had started consuming nutmeg like it was going to enlarge their breasts and grow their dick by 3 sizes. I had reached the point personally that I was smuggling bottled water in my briefcase and refilling it in the bathroom sink. This all came to a head when Debbie, a senior citizen who may well have been older than the building, decided she was going to have a party in the break room to commemorate her exit from the company after 35 years of employment. I'll let you guess what the flavor of the refreshments were. Attendance was mandatory, which meant I couldn't use my lunch break to buy real food. I had to stand there among 100 other hungry employees, all clamoring to get a piece of pumpkin log or perhaps an orange and black cupcake. If it wasn't bad enough, I was being forced to sit in this clusterfuck of forced socialization. It was Casual Friday. Everyone had come to work dressed in their Halloween costumes. I tried so hard not to snicker when Milo showed up dressed like a soldier. All he was missing was the SS insignia and the armband. Attendance was mandatory, but that didn't mean I had to consume any of the junk they had provided. As the rest of the staff filed through the line to get their fix, I stayed in the back of the break room and sipped tap water from a coffee mug in an attempt to blend in. Thankfully, the whole ordeal was over within the hour and I was allowed to return to my desk. Milo goose-stepped through the aisles with no appreciation for irony as I pretended to give a shit about the data being splayed across my screen in rapid succession. Roughly an hour after lunch was when I noticed Sean, a guy who worked 3 units down the row from me, stumbling through the aisle clutching his temples like he'd been kicked in the head. Before long, I noticed that even Milo had gone from goose-stepping about to standing in the corner clutching his head. I stood up and peered over the walls of my cubicle to see everyone in the office was grabbing their head in some form or fashion as their moans and groans erupted into a chorus of discomfort and pain. Debbie was the first one to start laughing maniacally at her desk. I looked over to see she was using the stapler on her desk to fire staples into the air while giggling like a child who had just discovered they had toes. Sean stumbled over to the coffee pot and poured himself a drink, while Milo staggered over to Debbie and shouted,
"That's enough, Debbie!"
Debbie kept laughing as she turned her stapler toward Milo and said, "Pew pew pew!" as she fired the tiny pieces of metal into Milo's general direction. Milo responded by ripping the stapler out of her hands and drawing back to slam the base of the stapler against her face. A random coworker started to scream as Milo repeatedly bashed the same piece of metal into Debbie's skull. The screams erupted into a cacophony of fear as Sean turned around to throw his coffee into Milo's face. Milo responded by turning around and taking a bite out of Sean's shoulder before chewing the chunk of flesh he'd torn away and swallowing with an honest-to-God smile on his face. I had no desire to stick around for the clusterfuck that was developing, and threw any personal belongings I thought important enough to keep into my briefcase before ducking down and moving down the aisle of cubicles. Annie, the girl in the cubicle directly adjacent to mine, had taken to writhing around on the floor with a stuffed animal between her legs while repeatedly shouting, "Oh yeah, fuck me, Tibbers!" I broke into a jog only to find Kyle, another middle-aged manager who had come dressed like a pirate, waving his plastic sword around and shouting,
"Arg, me hearties!"
The exit door was blocked by two coworkers, Jane and Tom, humping each other like teenagers as Jim, the guy who worked in the supply closet, stood over them, pulling his pud. I turned around to see the entire office had devolved into random acts of sex and violence, and realized I'd have to wade through a sea of crazy to make it to the main door and out into the street. There were 6 rows of cubicles between myself and freedom. Each step consisted of avoiding some different coworker losing their shit, like someone spiked the punch bowl at the loony bin with acid. Star, a 20-year-old temp worker filling in for Sharon while she was out on maternity leave, was using an X-Acto knife to carve words into the back of a very dead Andre while saying, "Dear Diary, today I found out Andre was planning on asking me to marry him." As I tried to shuffle past her, she swung the small knife toward my ankles and shouted, "Go get your own pen!" I looked down to see the blood from the X-Acto knife had splashed onto my khakis and tried to step over Megan, the intern, as she crawled on the floor picking nits of debris out of the carpet and shoving them into her mouth. With 1 row down, I realized I was only going deeper into the abyss as I peered over to see the path was blocked by the mail cart and that Kevin, the mail guy, was using his scan gun to bash Mark, the manager's skull, while screaming incoherently. I made it 3 cubicles down the aisle before I felt someone latch onto my shoulder and tackle me to the ground. Leslie, a woman I had talked to once or twice around the water cooler, had jumped onto my back and said, "Do you think I'm pretty, William?" Her gums were bloody and she was missing her front teeth. Blood and saliva dripped onto my face as I threw her off me and stumbled to my feet shouting, "Fuck off!" Leslie curled up into a ball and screeched like a howler monkey. At the end of the aisle, I found Jessica cowering in her cubicle. Unlike the rest of the crazies, she seemed to be genuinely scared. I reached over to tap her on the shoulder and she jerked away. I attempted to speak over the roaring chaos that surrounded us and said, "Come with me, I'm getting out of here." Jessica grabbed my outstretched hand and we moved down the row a few paces before Kyle came running towards us with the blade from the paper trimmer in his hand. I jumped to the side as Jessica attempted to move around him only to meet the blade as Kyle brought it down hard into her skull. With the blade stuck, he tried in vain to pull it from her skull as I pushed past him and towards the exit. No sooner than I had passed him, he shouted,
"I'll have your head, William!"
I rounded the corner on the last row and found Milo, stripped down to his boxers and sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the bodies of our coworkers as he slapped his hands repeatedly against the bloody corpses and shouted,
"Look, Mommy, I'm a drummer."
I made it to the exit door and pushed against it, only to find someone had chained it shut from the outside. I kicked the door as Kyle rounded the corner with Jessica's head still attached to the blade. Milo smiled at Kyle, who proceeded to bash Milo's face in with Jessica's severed head until it dislodged from the blade. Faced with no exit and nowhere to go, I threw my briefcase at Kyle and broke into a sprint down the aisle and around the corner into the row along the far wall. With nothing else to lose, I took the last few steps knowing I was about to collide with the window. I jumped through the metal and glass to fall down onto the sidewalk below. I landed on my back, but thankfully my fall had been broken for the most part by a folding table one of the vendors had set outside. I peered up to see Kyle standing at the window. He threw his blade down at me and it bounced off the concrete before clattering to a stop beside me. I did a double take and he had disappeared back into the chaos. It wasn't long before the court square was packed to the brim with police cars and ambulances. I sat with a paramedic as they prepped me for a trip to the emergency room. I peered out the window as I was taken to the hospital and noticed that several of my coworkers had started charging the police. I heard gunshots in the distance as the paramedic in the driver's seat turned on the siren and drove off into the city. My cousin Ethan and I grew up together, but I never liked him very much. His family was rich, so he always had the best stuff. Mine wasn't. I didn't. On Halloween 1985, we were going trick-or-treating together. I was the Terminator, he was Freddy Krueger. His mask cost almost $100 and it looked exactly like Freddy's face. The scars, the sneer, everything was just right. I didn't have a mask. My parents couldn't afford one. I had torn aluminum foil taped to the side of my face. It was meant to look like the Terminator after some of its skin had been ripped off. A few splotches of ketchup on the foil were supposed to look like blood. As soon as it dried, it looked very little like dried blood and very much like dried ketchup. Despite my terrible costume, I was still excited to trick-or-treat. We didn't have candy very often at home, except maybe on Easter. My parents encouraged me to go to as many houses as I wanted to get all the candy I'd be able to eat. It felt good to know they wanted me to be happy. Ethan and I went out at sundown and visited house after house. Every time the homeowners would gush over Ethan's mask. They'd tell him how scary it was, how realistic. Then they'd turn to me and ask who I was supposed to be. I'd answer and they'd say something like, "Oh, of course. How could I have missed it?" I could tell they felt sorry for me. One even handed me an extra few pieces of candy. When we were done, our pillowcases stuffed with treats of every sort, we began the long walk home. As we went, Ethan rooted around in his bag of loot. I could hear him grumbling and complaining through his mask. Then he started throwing candy on the street, stuff he didn't like. "Go ahead and pick it up if you want it, Bill," he called out, heaving handful after handful into the gutter. "I know you can't afford to let anything go to waste." I didn't say anything, but I reached into my pocket and pulled out the lighter and one of the 2 cigarettes I'd stolen from my dad. I'd been smoking on and off for the last few months, and even at 13, I knew it was bad for me. I just didn't care. It made me feel good. I stayed a few steps behind Ethan as he tossed more candy away, and as much as I hated myself for it, I ended up picking a few pieces off the ground and putting them in my bag. Ethan caught me once and laughed. "You're going to be as fat as your mom if you eat all that." I kept my mouth shut. "Is that why she got fired from the restaurant? Did she eat a customer's food?" I knew Ethan was joking. He did it often. I'm sure in his mind he thought he was being harmless and playful. Still, I'd told him more than a few times to leave Mom out of the jokes. She had diabetes, and she hadn't mentioned it to anyone other than my dad and me, but the doctor told her she might end up losing her foot. That's why the restaurant let her go. She couldn't walk around and wait tables anymore. "Change the subject, Ethan," I said. I knew he heard me, and he didn't talk for another minute or so, until he did again.
"You think her and your dad still fuck? I wonder how he manages to get it in there, heh."
He cackled, then insisted.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm done. Promise."
I seethed as we took a shortcut through the elementary school soccer field.
"Let's stop here for a minute,"
Ethan said. We'd gotten to the school's playground.
"I bet I could scare the shit out of some kids if they come by."
He sat on one of the swings with his pillowcase on his lap. He kicked his legs and the swing moved back and forth. I stood there, hating him. "I think I see some kids coming over the hill," I told Ethan. "I'm going to hide behind the slide and sneak up on them if they come over to you."
"Go for it,"
Ethan told me, his voice deep and distorted through the mask. I left Ethan on the swing set and walked over to the slide. I watched him swing as his hateful words rang in my ears. Tears came to my eyes as I remembered Mom smiling from her spot on the couch as she encouraged me to go out and have fun. She was such a good person. So good. She'd never said anything negative about Ethan. In fact, she'd always complimented him on his grades and his wins in basketball and even his looks. "You're going to be a handsome man, Ethan," she told him. "I bet we'll see your face in a magazine someday." Even after her kindness, Ethan still felt it was okay to trash her. I heard him laughing to himself from across the playground. I didn't know why exactly, but I had a pretty good idea. I reached in my jacket for the other cigarette, knowing the smoke would calm me down, but it had come apart. My pocket was full of loose tobacco and paper. Loose tobacco, paper, and the lighter. Ethan was still laughing as I fingered the lighter in my pocket for a second, then pulled it out. I walked up behind him. He didn't know I was there as he shouted out,
"Okay, one more thing, and I'll never say anything about her again. But unless your dad's got a big dick, he'll never manage to."
I flicked the lighter near the back of Ethan's neck, right where his hair and the mask met. The hair went up quickly, using his hairspray as an accelerant. Then something happened that I didn't expect. The mask burst into flames. Ethan jumped off the swing and ran in a loose circle, trying to pull the mask off his head. I saw it ripping under his fingers. He couldn't get a grip. The material bubbled. His screams, barely muffled as the molten chemicals clung to his skin, echoed off the brick walls of the elementary school. After a few seconds, he fell and rolled around on the playground, pushing his head into the sand to put out the fire. And he succeeded, but the damage was done. He turned over on his back, no longer screaming, but gasping in shallow, hyperventilated breaths. In the moonlight, I saw the mask was completely fused to what remained of his skin. One of his eyes had apparently burst, but his other darted around almost like he was confused and wondering where he was. I saw something moving on the other side of the field. Kids were coming. I yelled at them to call an ambulance, and I waited, unsure of how I felt, until the paramedics got there. I took complete responsibility for setting Ethan on fire. I said I'd been sneaking up to scare him by flicking the lighter near his face. And yes, I got in a lot of trouble, but everyone believed it was an accident. Ethan's face was destroyed. He had skin grafts and bone grafts and all sorts of reconstructive surgery. He never recovered. Not physically, not emotionally. He killed himself in 1990. His parents held a very expensive funeral. I was invited. They'd forgiven me for my part in his accident years before. In fact, their subsequent lawsuit against the mask company is the reason why Halloween masks are now made of flame-retardant materials. Mom died a few years before Ethan, but not before complications from her diabetes took her left leg. Dad and I were with her in the hospital at the same time Ethan's parents were there to see him through another round of reconstructive surgery. They visited Mom, Dad, and I while Ethan was still under, recovering after a successful set of grafts. We chatted for a little while about Mom's hopes for recovery, and then the topic moved to Ethan. Ethan's mom was gushing about a plastic surgeon that had recently joined the hospital after working in Switzerland. He was the best, apparently. He'd taken on Ethan's case earlier in the year, albeit remotely, and wrote a substantial article about the new techniques he'd be employing. In the world of plastic surgery, it made a big splash, if only for its ambition. Ethan's mom reached into her purse and pulled out the publication. She flipped it open to the page that showed various photographs of Ethan's burns and the notes and explanations the surgeon had written to accompany the article. I could tell Mom was holding back tears. I knew why, too. Her eyes met mine, and she couldn't hold back any longer. She began to weep. Dad and Ethan's mother held her while she cried. I just watched. Mom was thinking that she'd been right all those years ago. She'd been right for all the wrong reasons, but right nonetheless. Just like she'd predicted, Ethan's face had finally made it into a magazine.
They woke me up, the goddamn bastards. First good night of sleep I've had in years, and they woke me up. I knew they'd come, but this soon? Risked a peek through the window. The street down there was trashed from the previous night. Candy packages everywhere, toilet paper rolls, pieces of candy. God damn it, those kids!
It's a small town, you know? Very small. The kind of town where you'll get angry looks from overprotective parents if you refuse to take part in this pathetic little ritual of theirs. The kind of town where they'll question whether you're good enough to be a teacher if you won't participate in this senseless tradition of feeding sugar to their greasy infants once a year. The thought of it makes me want to puke. Trick or treat? Yeah, right. Extortion is what they call it in courts. I've refused to take part in that nonsense. Look at them. Grown men and women, some still wearing last night's costumes. I bet they get off leaving the house like that. Todd Jacobs is dressed like a vampire. Wow, real creative, Todd. Hannah Mitchell's is some colorful-haired character from some stupid superhero movie. She was crying now, and the mascara rolled down her face. Heh, funny. Someone spotted me watching through the window and threw a rock at it. The glass shattered. They were screaming their lungs off. This was serious. Oh boy, I hate this town so much. They punched the door, more of them arriving at each second. 20 of them, no, 30. Was that the sheriff? The door would give any time now. All because I didn't want to take part on their precious tradition. All because they couldn't accept that someone was different. I ran into the basement just as the door fell. That mob of senseless monsters got in. I opened the fridge and picked up the beaker glass. It looked like water, with a tiny bit of smoke floating around in it. I could feel my shirt moving as my heart pounded beneath it. Yes, I've refused to take part, refused to even open the door to those spiteful children. I refused last year, and they made me pay for it. This time, though, I had learned my lesson. I did it. I took part, but still, here they were, angry, mad, crying. They stormed the basement just as I emptied the beaker. My whole body trembled as I was suddenly shaking on the floor. You're not supposed to take so much at once. You gotta take a very small dose. This way, it will take about 6 hours before acting, but when it acts, it's a matter of seconds. Small doses, just like the ones I slipped inside the candies. Have you ever wondered why some windows in Vermont are portrait-style windows, but they're angled diagonally so that the long edge of the window is parallel to the roof? These windows are found almost exclusively in Vermont, hence their moniker, Vermont window. Raised dormer windows, which can leave a room very cold, are unusual in Vermont, where retaining warmth in winter is paramount. When a house is expanded on or built, there is often very little wall space in which to put a window, so the solution is to rotate the window until its long edge is parallel to the nearby roofline. This way, not only is the window area and any incoming light maximized, but building or buying a custom window is avoided. All of that aside, Vermont windows is not what the locals refer to them as. Instead, we use the term witch window, and will jokingly tell out-of-state visitors that witches can't fly their brooms sideways. The visitors will nod and laugh and then go purchase a gallon of local maple syrup without a second thought about the weird little architecture design. Too bad we locals can't forget about them. See, the windows weren't made to keep witches out. They were made to keep witches in. My sister Jane was a witch, and our parents used one to trap her inside. She couldn't escape through the window, but she could have enough sunlight and fresh air to keep her from going completely insane. I remember how Jane's pretty raven hair, such a striking contrast to the blonde hair of the rest of our family, would hang in greasy clumps when she would be locked in her room for days on end. Our parents would let her out occasionally to use the outhouse or to eat, but she wasn't allowed to speak or look anyone in the eye. It was an accident that caused her to be branded as a witch. She was only 6, but had been walking our dog Cookie in a storm because Cookie had to go potty. Everyone hated that dog, mainly because he was a terrifying lump of flesh that would as soon bite you as look at you. Our father insisted on keeping him around as a guard dog from bears and mountain lions, and he made us take him out to go potty. That fateful night when Jane was outside, her teeth chattering from the cold New England rainstorm, a stray bolt of lightning struck the dog. It fried him, and when Father came out to see what the screaming was about, he rounded on Jane, smashing his fists into her face. He called her horrid names while accusing her of witchcraft and being the devil's own whore. She was confined to her room, and for the first week, she was kept in shackles. Mother had doctors come from as far as Boston to see if they could cure her of her evil ways, but none succeeded. Next, our brother Timmy, only a babe, died in his sleep. Of course, that was Jane's fault too, according to Father's lectures to me. He beat her more that night, and that time he broke her ribs. I tried to stop him from hurting my sister, but being a 7-year-old girl meant that there was nothing I could do to stop a fully grown man. He brushed me off like I was an insect, and he told me that if I ever tried to interfere again, he would beat me too. That was the first time Jane didn't get fed, and that night I snuck out to bring her food. Per usual, her door was bolted from the outside, and to be extra safe, it was padlocked with a key that only Father had. I didn't need a key though, since I knew another way. I quietly snuck outside and used the apple picking ladder to get up to Jane's window. I broke off pieces of a few pilfered dinner rolls that I had been able to stuff into my apron pockets, and there were tears in my eyes as I watched Jane drag herself over to the window from her bed. Even in the dim moonlight, I could tell from her body language that she was hurt badly, but I couldn't see much of her through the small, slanted window. She reached a small hand out to me, and the only sound that broke our silence was her ragged breathing. I tried to talk to her, but she didn't answer. Her hand just kept coming out again and again until the bread was gone. That was how the next few years passed. I turned 10, then 12, then 15. Jane never spoke to anyone again, but each night I faithfully snuck her out food. I had noticed long ago that the hand coming out of the window never got bigger, and I knew that years ago Father had unchained Jane's door and gotten rid of everything in the room, but I kept doing it because it was the only way that I could get my beloved little sister to eat. Halloween night. For many people, it beats the Super Bowl, Christmas, and New Year's combined. As a kid from the suburbs, personally, I wasn't really a fan. I had nothing against the holiday itself, but when you grow up seeing CSI murder scenes on every lawn come October, it becomes a little too morbid. This year was the first time in as long as I can remember I was actually excited about the holiday. I had just turned 21 a month before and had roommates who drank like fish. With a major holiday around the corner, it meant one thing. We're getting sideways. My excitement had another reason. A girl named Liz, who I had gotten close with and had developed quite a crush on, was a Halloween fanatic. She told me she was going to the same bar as I was with her roommates dressed as a biker game. I'll let you guess what show. I had been crushing on her for a long time, and after much thought and encouragement from my roommates, I decided this was going to be the night I asked her out. It was 9 at night when me and my roommates finished getting ready. Jack, a 6'1" avid swimmer, was wearing a flannel, thick glasses, and had written, "I chopped wood before it was cool," on the blade of a fake axe. Hipster or lumberjack, he called it. Dave, 6 foot and skinny, was wearing dirty jeans, a white t-shirt, and a trash can on his head. White trash. Finally, John, a 6'3" former football player, was wearing regular clothes and a sign around his neck that said, "Nudist on strike." My costume was a robe, a wand, and a football helmet. Fantasy football. We piled into a cab, after pre-gaming with a 30 rack, and made the 5-minute drive to Teddy's on the Rocks. It was a big building with a square bar in the middle and a stage on the opposite side of the entrance. We went through the double doors and straight to the bar. I pulled out my cell phone and texted Liz to see when she was showing up. Right as I put the phone back in my pocket, the doors swung open. Speak of the devil. There was Liz and her roommates, all leather, jeans, and attitude. They saw us immediately and made their way through the crowd. We all said our hellos and regular pleasantries before jumping into conversation. The entire time, Liz was standing close enough for me to catch a whiff of her perfume every time she turned her head. Now or never. I asked Liz to go outside, and she followed me out to the back patio. We talked a bit more before I had the courage to pull the trigger. What do you think about going out sometime?" I asked her, heart in throat. She cocked her head to the side. "Excuse me?" I stammered. You know, like, going to dinner or something." She smiled at me. "Are you asking me on a date?" I took another deep breath. "Well, yeah." There was the longest pause of my life. Liz grinned. Then she burst out laughing. "Oh, Mike, that's so cute. You honestly think you have a shot with me?" A pit formed in my chest. What? She tilted her head back and roared with laughter. "Come on, Mike. I'm at least an 8. And you? Well, you're a 4 if I'm feeling generous. It would never work, but it's so cute that you think it would." She cackled her entire way back to the bar. I stood stupid with my heart, stomach, and jaw on the floor. I went back inside the bar. Was she drunk? That was not the Liz I had become so close with. I had no idea what had gotten into her. Me and her used to make fun of girls like that. The only things I knew for certain is one of my closest friends had finally shown her true self, and I was going to get blackout drunk. I sat at the bar, slamming back shot after shot of high-proof whiskey. The laugh was the worst part of it. I'll admit I'm not the best-looking guy, but still. I was motioning towards the bartender to refill my empty shooter for the I don't know what time, when I looked up from my empty shot glass. Clear across the room, she was there, leather arms wrapped around Jack's neck. The two kissing on the middle of the dance floor. They paused for a minute so she could put her head next to his bicep. She looked me dead in the eyes and winked. Jack knew I liked her. 2 betrayals in one night. I was on a roll. I got up and left the bar. It was only a 30-minute walk back to the dorm, and the beer-whiskey combo was keeping me warm, if nothing else. I wanted to pull up my phone and call Jack to curse him out, but after patting my pockets, I realized I had left it at the bar. To add insult to injury, as I was going up the hill to my building, trying hard to hold back puke, I heard the sound of breaking glass. A bottle exploded in front of me, and a car rushed by with the driver screaming,
Asshole!
I got back to my dorm and went straight to the bathroom. I closed the door and just stared at the mirror for a bit. Asshole. The driver was right. There were other words I was calling myself, but that one seemed to fit best. I stared at myself in my costume. I looked ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I ripped everything off with angry fists as I slid down onto the bathroom floor. That's when I heard the front door open and the voices, Jack and Dave's, to be precise.
Fuck him, dude. He's a loser,
Jack said.
Can't believe he actually thought he had a chance. Haha.
Dave responded with a laugh. I wanted to get up and scream at them, but I just didn't have the strength. I heard them grab something, and with a slam, they left the room. For the first time in years, I cried. I know, men don't cry, but men get the girl. Men surround themselves with loyal friends. I was shooting 3 for 4 fake best friends. I admitted what I truly was. Nothing. I had checked out. Player 1 has left the game. Cash in your chips and go home. That was how my Halloween night went, until I finally had the intelligence to just pass out. I woke up the next morning on the cold bathroom floor. I got up and sulked out into our common room to see John lying on the couch. He looked up at me and smiled.
You dropped this at Teddy's,
He said while sliding my phone across the coffee table.
Don't be mad, dude, but Dave got wasted last night and said things.
He added with a half grin. Yeah, I heard him talking. I said bitterly. Please tell me I at least still have John. I picked up my phone and saw the green light flashing. I had new text messages.
Dave asked out Holly and she said yes. He was so happy he ended up talking to Liz for a bit. Dude talked you up like you cured cancer.
He continued. I opened up the text on my phone. 2 new messages from Liz. The first was, Can't come down tonight. Jen's having a crisis. Stop by the room later. The second message said, We really should talk tomorrow. Lunch? I was so enraged. I was going to smash my phone on the floor until I saw another text. There was a collection of where are you messages, all from the guys and Liz's roommates. The message I focused on was from Dave.
Got your back, dude. Just call me Bro Sidon, king of the Broshin. Fuck yeah, America.
I stared at the message written in fluent drunkenese, too angry to think. I fucking heard Jack and Dave come in last night making fun of me. Liz fucking laughed in my face when I asked her out. What kind of sick shit is this? John lifted himself off the couch with a concerned and confused look.
Dude, Liz didn't go out last night. She was doing damage control boyfriend crap with Jen. Also, Dave never came back to the room. We went straight to their room after the bar and he stayed the night.
There's no way. I remembered everything. The fight, the laughing, the bottle.
We went looking for you at the bar, but Jack left early and said he saw you walking up the hill. We figured you went to bed or something.
The door opened and a smiling, still drunk Dave stumbled in.
Well, if it isn't Disapiro,
He said with a laugh. I went to say something, but he cut me off.
Dude, Liz likes you likes you. Giggling Japanese schoolgirl crush likes you. Better get your ass looking presentable. Your blushing bride wants a sit down.
He laughed again and went into the kitchen. John shook his head.
In case you don't speak Ozzy Osbourne, Liz likes you back.
I just stood as stupid as I had the night before, as I thought I had the night before. I heard you and Jack, I muttered. This all made no sense. I heard them. I saw them.
Where is that motherfucker anyway?
Dave asked as he stumbled towards Jack's room, mug of coffee firmly in his hand. I stood stunned. What had happened? This had to be a prank. One of Dave's twisted jokes. My train of thought was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. A few weeks ago, Jack was doing research on local legends for a paper. One of the stories he came across was called The Spirits Game. Story was, every year on Halloween, the dead would rise and freely roam the earth. Some of the more malevolent ones would invite the still living to play a game. It was simple. You won if you made it through what would be one of the worst nights of your life. Winners get everything they personally wish for and a lifetime of happiness. Losers joined the dead. The spirits would use hallucinations, false memories, and psychological torture to try and expand their ranks. After Jack explained the rules, Dave and John agreed, "Fuck that." I thought for a moment and said, "You know what? I think I'd give it a try." Jack nodded.
Yeah, me too.
That memory was playing over and over again in my mind. In front of me, John frantically shook a dead Jack. Vomit covered his flannel shirt and his skin was ash gray. Dave was down the hall, screaming and pounding on the RA's door. I stared at the body of my friend, my loyal to the end friend. A half-empty bottle of vodka laid on its side, mixing with a turned-over bottle of Percocet. Jack had just as bad of a night as I had, but while I was lying down on the bathroom floor, he decided to self-medicate. On the floor of his bedroom, liquor mixed with the pills the same way it did in his stomach. Player 2 has left the game. Last Halloween at 11:25 p.m., the doorbell rang. I'd just gotten to bed. Thinking I could ignore it and go to sleep, I clicked off the TV and pulled the covers up. The doorbell sounded again. And again. And again. I threw off the covers, put on my bathrobe, and stormed out of the bedroom. If it was a group of kids playing a prank, I told myself, even their parents wouldn't be able to identify their bodies. I unlocked and opened the front door. On the doorstep was a young boy wearing a Native American headdress and an ornately beaded leather vest and pants. He was clutching a bag of candy to his chest. No one else was around. It was unseasonably cold that night, and without any adults around, I couldn't let the kid stay out there and freeze. He looked miserable. I held him by his shoulder and guided him inside. Then I picked him up and placed him on the couch. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police seemed like the only safe bet, so I dialed the non-emergency number. While I waited on hold, I heated up some water to make the kid a mug of hot chocolate. The kid stared at me while I stood in the kitchen. He didn't say a word. I felt bad for the little guy. The receptionist at the police station answered, and I told her what was going on. She said she hadn't heard about any missing kids, but as soon as the car was free, one would be sent over. She cautioned it might be a while, though. Apparently, Halloween's a busy time for them over there. With the water boiled and the instant hot chocolate made, I went over to the kid and sat down next to him on the couch. I placed the mug on the table across from us. After cautioning him that it was hot, I figured I needed to talk to him. "Nice costume," I told him. It wasn't really that nice. Pretty culturally insensitive nowadays, but whatever. "Thanks," he replied. "So, did you lose your parents?" I asked. The kid shook his head. "How about your brothers or sisters or friends?" Again, no. "Want to try the hot chocolate? It's really good." "I don't like chocolate." "Oh, okay." I picked up the mug and started drinking, wondering if the kid was slow or something. Who doesn't like chocolate? We sat in silence for a little while. He kept his eyes on the unpowered television while I did everything in my power to not appear creepy. I never know how to act around kids. "Did you have a good time trick-or-treating?" I asked, then realized it was a stupid question. He'd gotten separated from his family or friends, for fuck's sake. How good could it have been? The kid, to my surprise, nodded. "I got what I wanted," he said. "Oh, and what was that?" The doorbell rang, and I hopped off the couch to answer it. 2 officers. I invited them in, and they saw the boy on the sofa. They greeted him and asked him the same questions I had. He had nothing to say to him, though. In fact, he looked angry, almost like he hated them. After a few minutes of getting nowhere, the officers said they were going to bring him back to the station. There still hadn't been any reports of a missing child. As they were about to leave, there was a call on the police radio, something about a murder on 113 Chestnut Place. The three of us stood very still for a moment. I live at 115 Chestnut. My neighbors, Paul and Lynn Chesney, had lived there for decades and were the curators at a local museum. The officers answered the call on their radio and said they were nearby. They were told backup would be there shortly.
Wait here,
The cops ordered, and the kid and I just looked at each other while the two men left the house and headed next door. Don't worry, it's okay, I promised the boy. He looked flat, unaffected. Then he turned and looked straight at me.
Bring this to the MTIC. It all belongs to them.
He handed me his bag. I was extremely confused for a second, wondering why the local Mohegan tribe would want Halloween candy. I opened the bag and gasped. A bloody stone knife sat atop a pile of beautiful beaded vestments, ornate carvings, and other old-looking artifacts.
Your neighbors have been keeping these from us. We tried to get them back, but they laughed and mocked our efforts, but they're too important to give up, especially after we've been forced to give up so much.
I stood like an idiot, holding the bag as sirens approached and the commotion outside grew.
Give it to them!
The kid shouted with a deep adult voice that was entirely out of place coming from his small body, and with that, he vanished. The headdress and pants and vest dropped in a pile on the rug. I spent a good 45 minutes convincing myself that I hadn't gone nuts. Hours later, an officer came back for the boy. What happened over there? I asked the cop. I already knew, but I needed confirmation.
Looks like the couple got killed in a robbery attempt.
He told me.
Their daughter came home from a Halloween party and found them with their throats cut. I'm sorry.
I let out a sigh and nodded.
Where's the kid?
The officer asked. I had an answer ready. There was a family going door to door with a picture of him. I guess he'd run away, but he's back with them now. The cop shook his head.
And they didn't even call us? Christ.
He paused.
Well, okay, good night. I'm sorry about your neighbors. We'll have officers in the area until whoever did it is found.
I thanked him and closed the door. It was almost 5:00 a.m. It was too late to go to bed. I had work in a couple hours. So I sat down at my computer, and with the kid's bag on the desk next to me, I mapped out directions for my drive to the MTIC.